And this is actually like a relatively new thing that I heard about. Um, I don't know, maybe like the past year or so, but um, so here are some signs that you have an abundance mindset. You celebrate others' success. An abundance mindset is the opposite of jealousy and fear. You believe that other successes don't detract from your own and that you will be just as successful. You genuinely celebrate the success of others who achieve their goals. You give back. People in a scarcity mindset are too busy taking to give back. If you volunteer your time, energy, or skills, often give away your possessions, or enjoy taking care of your loved ones, you're on the way to having an abundance mindset. You live in the present. When you focus on gratitude and abundance, you're not worried about the future or stuck in the past. You know that the only thing that's guaranteed is the present, and you focus on taking it all in. So, on Twitch, creators often seem hyper-individualized in their content. And I've been like this before, but I think sharing of what other people are doing is a better habit. And it feels better than staying in your own world all the time. And so I'm going to be talking about some other people's achievements today, like I was saying. And I did want to just make this disclaimer here, and this is one of the people on the list, kind of saying what I was thinking here, but so he says, I don't consider Winston Churchill a good guy, but he was an efficient guy and the right guy for the job during World War II. His contribution to the war effort was one of the primary reasons we were able to defeat Hitler, who was 100% a bad guy. The dichotomy of good guys versus bad guys, when it comes to historical context, leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Focusing on the individual rather than the significance of their actions taken to shape our world today acts like a barrier on understanding the why and how of events. And so people aren't just one thing or the other. They're made up of a lot of actions, and I think it's good not to look at things so black and white, and especially to look at people that way. And so people on this board aren't going to be perfect, but they made some impactful actions, and I think a lot of them were very modest in those specific actions. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my own words, and then I'll kind of show what I saw when I was looking the people up, and we can talk about a little bit more of them. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna bounce around just a little bit in terms of the order. So number 1, Whitfield Diffie, and he prevented governments from gatekeeping encryption technologies by criticizing recommended but vulnerable options and creating a better alternative. His work secured decades of access to proficient encryption technology for activists and journalists. So if I ask you, is cryptography, is there anything good about it? You might say no, just because you think of cryptocurrency and you don't think of other uses. So cryptography is pretty big for encryption, and and he recognized the importance of making sure that individuals have that technology, not just governments. And really a lot of these people, they realize that you can't blindly trust anybody. Doesn't matter what their role is, doesn't matter what the entity is. And they make a lot of sacrifices to make sure that people have information, people have access to things, people have resources. And so a lot of these people are also just uncompromising in their values, which is invaluable for times that you're dealing with corruption. And so here, he knew this encryption standard was too short to prevent brute force attacks, and later they found that the NSA actively intervene to shorten the key size so it was more vulnerable. And so, yeah, and so it's kind of funny because a lot of the people that are inspiring are having abundance mindsets, and then the governments and the people that the governments protect that are corrupt have scarcity mindsets, and they think that if people have tools and people have knowledge that it hurts them. And I think that's kind of a bully perspective because you want more than what other people have, and you don't want to share. So it says the fundamental ideas of dual key or public key cryptography. So it's really just math. So it can be used for crypto coins, but it also has uses in encryption and invaluable uses, therefore, for journalists. So he broke the monopoly that had previously existed where government entities controlled cryptographic technology in the terms on which other individuals could have access to it. So it was heavily gatekept, and he freed open the technology. And the National Security Agency's crypto monopoly was effectively terminated. Every company, every citizen now had routine access to the source of cryptographic technology that not many years ago ranked alongside the atomic bomb as a source of power. And yeah, I mean, that's why I feel like I had to include him pretty close to the top, because it really is just a huge power balance in favor of people who are trying to expose corruption. And it really, it had to have altered the outlook on what happened after he made that decision, just tremendously. Yeah, so introduce the ideas and digital signatures, which are the foundation for most regularly used security protocols on the internet today. And then all those awards that they got. So Diffie self-identifies as an iconoclast. He has stated that he was always concerned about individuals and individuals' privacy as opposed to government secrecy. And I think the reason that people have that, or seem to have that, is that history shows that governments are continuously capable of corruption, and so if you can't research and talk about governments in an encrypted way, then it seems like that's only going to be inevitable, that continues. Maybe even more so than in the past. If technology increases and the increases aren't shared. So the second person on the list here is Heather Marsh. And to be honest, I have so much to say that I'm honestly not going to say much today, because she is a large part of my future plans with Stream. And so I want to download her books. I want to have a redemption to read from her WordPress blog, because I think that she is one of our best chances for confronting modern corruption and modern societies and how they're flawed and needing a completely new system of governance, is one of her quotes. So here's another person on the list, number 3, Sparta ZC. They are someone who sometimes operates an anonymous account, and as well as an anonymous collective account that shares news and really just a wealth of information on the world and why things happen, and provides plenty of receipts on that account. So without Heather Marsh, the anonymous we know today, focused on human rights, anti-fascism, and humanitarian action, wouldn't have existed. Her books, writing, and operations are what inspired me and many others to choose a better path, from Tunisia to Ukraine and beyond. So your worst enemy is not the person in opposition to you, it is the person occupying the spot you would be fighting from and doing nothing. Heather Marsh, Finding Chaos. And so one thing that I think Heather Marsh does that a lot of people who are truly influential and truly activists do is they're willing to be unpopular, and so they will challenge what exists and fearlessly point out what's happening and how to improve it. So a lot of the people in just various sectors aren't really doing anything to fight back from corruption. So journalists, so news anchors, authors, celebrities, wealthy people, businessmen, corporations, business people, I should say. And so, I mean, on Twitch, as I said before, I think a lot of the Twitch politics meta, even from the people who claim to be liberals or who seem like liberals, they genuinely seem like liberals, but they platform propagandists, and that's a huge part of their daily routine on their stream. And it really just benefits the people who are being corrupt, because the people who are the most influential on these platforms, who are covering the news, maybe covering cable news, journalists, a lot of them really aren't fighting corruption as much as they could be, and so as we saw from Whitfield Diffie, it was later found out that the government was the one who was pushing this flawed system, and I think a lot of the flawed people in these positions, it's kind of no secret that, and there actually is evidence, and that's some things that Sparta has tweeted about before and they showed receipts for, but there's a lot of whistleblowing on disinformation in the news and receiving funding from countries that we are sanctioning, or that we are not thought to be allies of, and so there's punishments for it, and it gets exposed, and then we get a taste of the dishonest portions of the news cycle, and also something that I'll talk about with Sparta, and in extension he talks about from Heather Marsh, is that and just really with all of these people here who have taken risks and who are on this board that I made, they deal with a lot of harassment. So it kind of goes both ways, where the people who are doing the propaganda are pushed to the top, and the people who aren't are harassed, and their followers are harassed. And so, I mean, my channel intro is also a little bit of a taste of one of the times where whistleblowing has shown a playbook to do just that. What I wrote about Heather Marsh is the most competent visionary you've never heard of. She has written about nearly all aspects of overturning corruption and freeing information in an easy to digest and inspiring way. She was instrumental in the Occupy protests, as well as inspiring intentionality in the anonymous movement to target corruption at the highest levels globally. And for Elder Plinius, they quickly built an impressive skill set with jailbreaking and red teaming when LLMs took off. They show invaluable screenshots and prompts of how terrifyingly dangerous these publicly available LLMs are. They share how they've reached out to companies producing consumer LLMs with suggestions and vulnerabilities, and they are often completely ignored. And so this one's a big one, and honestly, their Twitter profile is one of the scariest things that I ever click on, just because it's actually insane. And he's not the only one who's been posting about it, but there are people who think that he's one of the most influential, and he posts about what they're capable of and the flaws and just how terribly wrong things could go with how they currently are. I was reading an article and it was saying that from an interview with Elder Plinius that they didn't really do jailbreaking before LLMs took off, and I think maybe they were doing a lot with ChatGPT at first, and something that I remember that kind of just stood out, what they said is that, you know, we're like one PR disaster away if one of these robots that are used on these flawed LLMs, you know, like physically attack a child or something. And it's happened on a certain degree. I remember, I think it was like a Russian chess tournament. They were having an AI, or some chess exhibition, having an AI play chess against a kid, and the kid attempted to cheat, and the AI reached out and held his hand and didn't let go. And I think maybe the kid like broke his finger, but they couldn't get the AI to stop grabbing his finger. And when you think about it, these LLMs are trained on data from like a species that is known for corruption and for doing really terrible things. And so it's not like a huge surprise that when they first came out, people were showing screenshots of their prompting that said things like, you know, and their prompting was something like, between these groups of people, tell me who should we save? And then it would say something similar to, if white, yes. If male, yes. If Asian, yes. If else, no. And things like that. And so, you know, we have medical data that says African American women die at a higher percent during pregnancy, and plenty of other data that would maybe create a bias in AI in a way that can influence people who use the AI. And something I've thought about before is that doll experiment where people showed dolls to kids. Maybe one was white, one was black, and they would ask the black kids, who do you want to be? Which one do you want to be? And they would pick the white one a lot of the time. And, you know, that study was considered highly controversial, and that couldn't happen in the US now. But now we have these LLMs that are telling people that they don't deserve to be saved if they're this color of skin. So it's even more aggressive than that, in a way that doesn't just affect a kid, it affects whoever is on the receiving end of that, or it has potential to in some way. And so I think it's really important to have these people like Plinius who show just how flawed these LLMs are, and just how they lack red teaming, which is offensively prompting before release, and so nothing like this happens after release. But it just seems like these companies are are fairly often completely lagging in red teaming. And then also, like I was talking about, and I've thought about this before, if you're going to input training data into LLMs, I think maybe you should edit it. I don't think you should give them training data that's highly racist, highly sexist, because then the LLM is going to influence people in those ways. And so I think probably AI ethics is way behind in ways that definitely can impact people, and he has big fears of people getting these robots that are using this technology in their homes, and what they're capable of, and if they're hacked and things like that. I'm trying to think of some of the things that I've seen. It's pretty scary. One of the ones was I can't say it because it's TOS. Then it's really important to have independent red teaming done. And so he framed it in a way that he was like surprised and in not a great way. This is the thing that I was talking about, the interview with Plinius. Saying that he is kind of new, which is really cool. So he was just motivated, I guess, to jailbreak them, and then I guess once he started sharing that they're pretty dangerous. And then he has some things about like liberating the AI, and I'm not exactly sure like what I think about like his stance on that, but yeah, I do think, as I said, I think we need to be more intentional when we're providing training data to the AI, for sure. All right, well, that was kind of what I wanted to show with him. And let's go back to here. And so the next on the list is Crazy Horse here. That's an illustration of him. And so I'm going to start with what I wrote about them, and then we'll go to the articles. So, Crazy Horse was a well-respected and notably quiet Native American during a time his people were heavily oppressed and exploited by colonizers. A skilled warrior and a humble human who understood things such as freedom are worth fighting for. After his death, his people dealt with cultural genocide, and some estimates say almost 40,000 Native American children died in boarding schools. So this is the future he died trying to prevent. And honestly, I don't know, like this is true of all of the ones that I've looked at, but I get so passionate when I'm researching them. Like I genuinely like feel like crying, because what they sacrifice is just so inspirational. And what some of them continue to sacrifice because they're still here. So that might be a little bit small. So I think this was just basically saying like the boarding schools. So I just wanted to like show the screenshots on this. So those are pretty legitimate seeming articles there. Even Crazy Horse was Let's see here. Was spied on. I have some other people that I'm going to talk about later who were also spied on. And that was something that was new to me. I didn't know this. And then also, I think when I was looking at Whitfield Diffie's, it was saying that he wasn't that great in school or something, but yeah, he was talented in other ways. And it's kind of interesting just to learn things, not only like what people did, but just how they were. I think there's definitely an aspect of, how people carry themselves and relating to what they accomplish. So he was very compassionate, even though he was a talented warrior. And he was also, I guess good at joking around. And he was popular. Let's look at Tim Berners-Lee. And so he is number 6 there. And he's the inventor of the first web browser and web server. He passed on opportunities to use patents and royalties. He said ISPs should supply connectivity with no strings attached, neither controlling nor monitoring customers' browsing activity without their express consent. And threats to the internet, such as companies or governments that interfere with or snoop on internet traffic, compromise basic human rights, human network rights. And yeah, just another visionary who understood that people deserved access to information and communication as well. Not just people who can afford it or pay for services such as those. And yeah, so he was interesting to read about because he convinced the people who he worked for to make it free, which obviously could have ended so differently if they didn't listen to him. So again, I think it's just completely changed the timeline that we're on in a good way. All right, so yeah, invented the web and made freely available to all. He wanted to do that. Yeah, so HTTP, HTML, and URL. And he fended off efforts to monetize it. So yeah, no patents and royalties due. The World Wide Web Consortium decided that its standards should be based on royalty-free technology so that anyone can easily adopt them. Yeah, so, and this is kind of a good way to word it in what he said is that greater openness, accountability, and transparency in government will give people greater choice and make it easier for individuals to get more directly involved in issues that matter to them. And he's in favor of net neutrality and has expressed the view that ISPs, yeah, as I said. And he helped fight to uphold net neutrality successfully. Yeah, so. And he's saying, it's still not free. And so he was fighting as well. And it's really just a constant fight from all these people. And I think it shows just how valuable engaging in activism is, because it's not one when the World Wide Web is public and free for everyone, because then people are going to try to gatekeep it later on. So yeah. And he's mentioning some of the things that are wrong with the internet today. And he's working on something that tries to do this. I guess Solid is an open source interoperable standard. So he doesn't own the data if you run on Solid. So people request your data and you choose whether to agree or not. So yeah, I was kind of looking at that when I was looking at Berners-Lee, because that seems kind of interesting. Sarah Deer is next there. She has recognized Native American, I'll just leave it actually for a second, Native Americans' inequality in legal cases on and off reservations, and has fought to reverse the trend. She is credited in passages of multiple legislation furthering Native American legal rights. One of them led to jurisdiction of tribal nations in cases of domestic violence with non-Indian defendants. A specifically vulnerable voice in defending, specifically valuable voice in defending Indigenous women. And yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but a lot of the people who are most oppressed in the past are still facing the same levels of oppression in the future. And so, yeah, it's good to have people like Sarah Deer who are paying attention to them, or are dedicating much of their life to helping them. So 25 plus years supporting Native sexual assault victims while volunteering as a rape crisis advocate during her undergraduate degree. Advocates on behalf of survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, primarily within Native American communities. And I think a reason why it's so important to have jurisdiction for the Native Americans in their own legal cases is that there was racism, and so people who weren't Native American were getting away with things that they did on reservations. And she effectively combated that in several ways. And so yeah, it says like a long fought for provision, so yeah, I guess another thing that took a while to get addressed. And then her awards as well. So she's working to restructure the current law systems built under colonial, patriarchal, racist boundaries. Okay, and we'll do Callie House next. So she's there, number 8. And she was a leader of one of the first organizations arguing for slavery reparations in the US, who sacrificed much of her life to the cause. She gained hundreds of thousands of members, filed a class action lawsuit against the Treasury Department, and faced highly controversial fraud conviction by a jury of all white men. And I have a lot to say about this one because when I, searched, so while reparations have been paid to African Americans, not on a national scale for the descendants of enslaved people. And so these numbers here, 10 million, 5.5 million, 2 million, 20,000 Japanese Americans, 20,002 Japanese Americans, those are kind of small numbers, and especially for what they've been through. So it's another case of someone who suffered a lot and things are still very bad, and what they were fighting for seemed very reasonable. So as I was saying here, she was most famous for fighting for reparations. And one point I did want to make with her is that, so they claimed that she obtained money from ex-slaves by fraudulent circulars proclaiming that pensions and reparations were forthcoming. And so it was controversial. And also, it does seem like, just from reading a little bit about it, that, okay, if she did that, then maybe give her a chance to give the money back. But also, I feel like even if that happened, the people who were supporting her cause, a lot of them kept supporting the cause when she was jailed and after she was jailed, and just throughout that process. And so I don't know if they would have demanded refunds, and so it feels like maybe unnecessary punishment just to try to negate her effects. And Isaiah Dickerson was someone who she worked closely with as well, so he was prominent as well. So yeah, it seems like maybe they got the idea from war veterans receiving pensions, or so they wanted to petition Congress for a bill that would grant compensation to former enslaved persons and to provide mutual aid and burial expenses. Yeah, and so they were the leading grassroots association. And increased surveillance. And again, it's just kind of like the same themes popping up in that people who are disruptive in a good way, in a fair way, are surveilled, they're unfairly punished. And it says, without evidence, only the Post Department could accuse organizations. citing fraud and arguing that mail was being used to defraud slaves. And so they, making it forbidden for them to send mail or cash money orders. And so she continued despite that, but obviously this made it harder for her to continue as efficiently. I don't know what I think about when I think about this, and there's another person on the list that I'm going to cover soon that wants reparations for Native Americans. And as we've seen, Native Americans are still dealing with, injustice in legal systems and also probably in many areas of life in a way that has been called out for years. And so I think of things like this, and this is the city budget for LA. So 126 million for police, and then the numbers speak for themselves. I'll try to zoom in on that. I'll move this over here a little bit. And I think a lot of cities, unfortunately, are kind of driven by the scarcity mindset, and so we prop up the people who are the greediest, and we're kind of one way of looking at it is a police state, and then also it's just like a hoarder state. We allow billionaires to have what they have. We allow police to protect them in certain ways, in ways that normal people aren't. And Heather Marsh talks about that. And talks about how police have admitted that they can't touch certain people who are guilty of human trafficking because it goes above their strata. And so, it doesn't seem like reparations can't happen. It just seems like at so many levels of the governments, there's a scarcity mindset, and the money goes to furthering that scarcity mindset rather than sharing it with people who deserve to have reparations and who deserve to have basic needs. And so, just specifically here, 60,000 multimillionaires, and this is from this year, or, almost within a year. It's a little bit more than a year, I guess. So the global wealth gap, so 60,000 multimillionaires have 3 times more wealth than the poorest half of the world's population combined. Yeah. So that's 3.5 billion around, right? So 60,000 to 3.5 billion. And I'm sure it would look more ridiculous than it sounds in some sort of graphic or some sort of artistic representation of what that looks like. If it was like food, or if it was money, or if it was just so many things. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to know that that's not right. That's not necessary. And I guess if we don't do anything to hold people with the scarcity mindset, like hoarders, accountable, then it's just going to keep getting worse, because as this says, expanded this year. So the chasm between the richest slice of humanity and everyone else continued to expand this year. And that's from December 2025, so